Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. Today we're checking out the Satori, a new mastering grade monitor controller from Antelope Audio. That's the unit I have here behind me. I've got it set up with an Antelope Audio Zen Studio audio interface. I've also got audio coming from a second computer in here so we can check out some of the functions of this device. In Japanese, Satori means enlightenment, which is definitely apropos when you're talking about listening through your monitors and trying to hear clearly into your music. Now, the Satori monitor controller gives you a ton of connectivity. You've got 8 stereo inputs selectable from the front panel. You also have 4 stereo monitor outputs as well as a dedicated subwoofer output. We have 4 stereo headphone feeds, and each of those can be addressed independently. Tons and tons of connectivity here, letting the Satori serve as a central piece for your recording studio. We'll begin with a quick tour of Satori's front panel. First of all, we have the power selector on the far left. Next to that, 8 switches for selecting among the inputs. Then we have a sum button here. The way Satori is set up, inputs 5 through 8 are on a D-sub connector on the back, so you have 8 channels of input coming in on that single connector. Use a breakout cable to connect that to your various devices. But those can either serve as 4 independent monitor inputs, or you can use that as an 8-channel summing bus. And then when you hit this summing button here on the front panel, that sum will be fed into your monitors. In the center of the front panel, we have the large control knob. Now by default, this is going to control the level of our monitors. When we press that, the light comes on over the first headphone output. We now have control over that volume level. Press it again, we have the second headphone feed, and so on. Press it again, we'll return to our monitors. The other thing we can do with this control is actually an undocumented feature, so here's a tip for you. If you hold the input and you turn this knob, you can set the output for that input level. You have up to plus or minus 6 dB of input gain available for each of the inputs, and those can be set independently. The other nice feature with this rotary controller is that it's actually a digital control. The entire signal path within Satori is analog, but you have digital control in 1 dB increments using this front panel knob. Next to this, we have 3 buttons that control settings for the monitors. We can mono the monitor input, so we collapse the stereo image into mono. You can also dim that by 20 dB, so if you're talking in the control room, you can drop the level of your monitors down. The bottom button, labeled MS, is very interesting. It works in conjunction with the mono button at top. So when we're in mono mode, and the MS button is not illuminated, what you're getting is the sum of the left and right channels together, as you'd expect when you combine in a normal mono setting. But when you press that button, what you're getting is the difference between the 2 channels. So you combine together the left minus the right, and that lets you very easily hear phase problems. Next to this, we have a built-in talkback mic on the front panel, and we also have a button for activating that. When you activate that talkback mic, you do dim the monitors by 20 dB. You can see the dim light comes on when you press that. Now you also have the option of bringing a talkback mic in via the back panel, or in fact you can plug a USB microphone into your computer and it will feed into Satori, and you can use that as your talkback as well. Next to this, we have 4 monitor select buttons for choosing among the monitors you have connected. Rounding out the front panel, we have 2 headphone outputs. There are an additional 2 outputs on the back panel. Now let's move to the back panel of Satori. On the far left, we have our IEC connector for AC power. Then we have a USB remote port. Now this port connects to your computer and allows you to run remote control software in your computer, taking charge of all the parameters inside of Satori, as well as giving you some additional features. If you're using a USB talkback mic connected to your computer, it also feeds through this connection. To the right of the USB remote port, we have our input section. Channel 1 or input 1 is a stereo input on XLRs, then channels 2, 3, and 4 are stereo inputs on balanced 1/4-inch connections. Next to this, we have stereo inputs 5 through 8. These are also balanced connections, but they're carried on D-sub connector. So we have the inputs for those 4 channels, and we also have a through for those, so if you want to send those on to additional devices, you can. To the right of the input section, we have our output section. Monitor output number 1 is on XLR connections. Monitor outputs 2 through 4 are on balanced 1/4-inch connectors. We also have an output for the summing, so if you're using inputs 5 through 8 to feed the summing bus inside Satori, you can get a stereo output feed from that using these jacks. Rounding out the back panel, we have a 1/4-inch connection for a talkback dynamic microphone. Then we have a dedicated output for the subwoofer or LFE channel. Finally, we have headphone output 3 and headphone output 4. As far as standard operation of Satori, you can do all that from the front panel. You can select your inputs, control your levels, dim the levels, mono the input, listen to the MS, and select among your outputs. So you have control over all the basic functions from right there on the front panel. But when you really want to dig into Satori, you can do it from within an app that runs in your computer. The Satori remote control panel gives you all the functionality that's on the front panel of the device, as well as additional extended features. So we can select among our 8 inputs. We can choose the sum input if we want to listen to that. You can also set the level of the summing using this fader here. We can also set our input trim and our output trim. So if we're listening here, we can bring that in, bring that up, and we can also adjust the output for each of our monitor outputs. In the center of the remote app, we have our master volume control. And you can control that with the mouse here, and you can see that the lights are actually changing, indicating the level is changing on the hardware box as well. And if we change the level on the hardware box, you can see that's changing inside the app too. We have our mono, dim, and a mute switch as well. You can also mute from the front panel by pressing and holding the master volume control. Up here is where we select among the 4 monitor outputs. Below the monitor output selection, you can control the LFE or subwoofer feed as well. You can mute that feed, bypass it. You can also engage a 110 Hz filter. We have control over some talkback functions as well. You can activate the talkback. You can also select where that talkback is coming from, the front panel, the back panel 1/4-inch jack, or if you have a USB mic connected. You also have control over the level of the talkback volume control, and you can see that changes to match whatever mic you have selected. This section of the app is where we route our headphones, and in fact you can independently address all 4 of those headphone outputs, letting this serve as a multiple headphone feed for all the artists that you're recording. So we can set the level for each of our headphones independently. We can mute our headphones independently. You can decide which ones will receive the talkback feed, and you can also assign the source that's feeding that. So any of our 8 input sources can be fed to our headphone outputs. At the bottom of the app, we have a high-resolution meter to display your levels. This effects section of the app is very interesting, and it allows some powerful options for checking the phase of our signals. So let's unmute our signal here. Normally, the left channel feeds the left output, the right channel feeds the right output. We can choose to invert the phase of the left channel, and this lets us listen to any phase problems we might have in our signal. We can also choose to invert just the right channel. We can invert both channels to listen to reverse polarity. We can flip the 2 channels, so left feeds right and right feeds left. Then we can invert and flip the 2 channels. And we can go back to our normal listening. So this is a great feature for ensuring that everything you're recording is in phase. Another great feature of the app is it allows you to store presets of the configuration you have set up for Satori. So you could have a preset saved for when you're tracking, another set up for mixing, another when you're checking your mixes on headphones, and easily switch among them. So right now we're set up to where we're not using a preset. If we click preset 1, we'll switch to input 3 and monitor output 2 with our talkback mic feeding to headphone output 4. If we select preset 2, we're now listening to input 5, monitor output 1, and our headphone outputs, none of them are receiving the talkback. Another nice feature is you can shrink the app window down. This turns it into a small floating version that stays on top of your DAW at all times, giving you instant access to the most needed functions. If you're looking for a monitor controller that provides mastering-grade audio quality, as well as a ton of functionality for balancing the levels of your input sources and your monitor levels, control over 4 different headphone feeds, having it serve as basically a headphone junction box for all of the talent that's in your studio, the Satori is one you definitely want to check out. Tons and tons of features in this box, and it sounds absolutely wonderful. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.